I was basically just trying to encourage everybody to vote in my small means that I had.
I just heard that Proposition 37 in California lost. For those of you who don't know about Proposition 37, it was an initiative to demand mandatory labeling for genetically modified organisms, GMOs.
I was enraging that didn't pass, and that, really moved me to do something more.
We have a false worldview that very consciously put in place a separation of humanity from nature.
What's going on here? And I start reading more, and I learn about GMOs, and then the more I read, the more I had to read.
Buried deep within the pages of that bill is a controversial piece of legislation that would keep the federal government from banning the sale of genetically modified foods.
After the show, a lot of people said to me that's current, why don't you talk about genetically modified foods? Okay, you're right, we should talk about genetically modified foods. And again, this is a conspiracy of both parties.
Well, amid accusations the Monsanto Corporation enjoys protection from the authorities, a recent report showed the US government has been aggressively lobbying for GM foods all across the world.
In 1992, the Food and Drug Administration decided that genetically modified organisms were the functional equivalent of conventional foods. They arrived at this decision without testing GMOs for allergenicity, toxicity, antibiotic resistance, and functional characteristics.
Every seed that is in the market in cotton today is linked to one company or the other, licensed and controlled by Monsanto.
The case brought 75-year-old Indiana farmer Vernon Hugh Bowman up against Monsanto, an enormous agricultural corporation that owns more than half the world's seed market. Monsanto requires farmers to buy its seeds genetically modified to resist this weed killer. But Bowman bought and planted second-generation seeds.
As a result, hundreds of millions of acres of GMO crops were planted in America without the knowledge or consent of the American people. No safety testing, no long-term health studies.
They don't need to be studied. Substantial equivalence was the basis. Biotech says, well, nothing was created, right? But this stuff is poison.
Technologies don't operate in isolation. They're contextual. And the context of the big GM crops we have today are monocultures. They are designed specifically. All the money goes into corn and soy. More corn and soy. Roundup Ready soy, BT corn.
The reason why GM crops are here is based on a deception that occurred in the FDA.
I hear from my patients that genetically modified foods must be safe because the FDA's approved it. They told us it's safe, right?
The agency in charge of GMOs is another three-letter acronym, the FDA, which has a real spotty record on food safety.
That's the whole foundation of the biotechnology industry, is a complete misrepresentation of everything we know about how genetics in complex organisms actually work.
Everyone in the research industry has gotten the message that Monsanto is sending. Speaking out against the biotech industry is not safe if you value your job.
Dr. Shiv Chopra was a senior scientist with Health Canada responsible for food safety. But when he refused to approve a genetically engineered drug intended for use in food production, he had a fight on his hands.
I was given a series of products to look at coming from the companies. Big companies like Monsanto, Eli Lilly, Pfizer, Bayer, these huge companies. And I say, this information is not satisfactory. Go back, produce more. They say, pass it anyway, because the US has passed it. I can't. And so therefore they say, you're fired. These politicians have made deals with the companies with vested interest.
Bovine growth hormone, the artificial hormone that farmers were injecting into their cows so that they would produce more milk.
With Monsanto, I didn't realize how effectively a corporation could work to get something on the marketplace.
Genetically modified crops. These provisions are giveaways, pure and simple. They deserve no place in this bill. We simply have got to do a better job on both policy and process.
Oh, I see the problem here. The other legislators didn't know about it because Senator Tester brought it up on the Senate floor. In front of all of them. Perhaps if he had written it in the memo field of a Monsanto lobbyist check, people would have seen it.
So in most instances, it's very rare
for executives or officials in these companies to be held criminally responsible. So we have the civil system, the civil courts. We make them pay. And the truth of the matter is, in most instances, the price these companies pay decades later is a fraction of their profits. And this is why it pays to keep these problems secret. And it makes you wonder what they might be keeping secret now.
Yes, we end up wondering if the contamination wasn't intentional. If the center of origin of corn becomes contaminated, the rest of the planet could follow. Contamination only benefits multinationals like Monsanto.
The genetically modified BT cotton seeds were introduced by St. Louis-based Monsanto, licensed and sold under the names of well-known Indian seed companies. BT seeds are patented, so farmers aren't allowed to grow and replant them. They must be bought every year from the seed companies.
That innocent farmer is grabbed by the agent who says, here's a miracle seed, it's going to double your income, you're going to be a millionaire, put your thumbprint out here. The farmer has no idea what he's signing on to. The farmer has no idea that 2 weeks down the line he'll have to come back for pesticide.
We saw very quickly that Roundup affected a key process in cell division. Not the cell division mechanisms themselves, but those which control cell division.
A wave of rallies is rolling across the globe in protest at biotech giant Monsanto. Campaigners and environmentalists in more than 40 countries accuse the multinational corporation of aggressively expanding into the food market and spreading hazardous products.
The FDA has received over 1 million comments from citizens demanding labeling of GMOs. 90% of Americans agree. So why no labeling? I'll give you one reason. The influence and the corruption of the political process by Monsanto.
They set standards for labeling of food so people can know what they're buying and hopefully choose healthy diets. Standards for labeling of foods.
Okay, the only way to deal with dogma is to change the paradigm. Okay.
Oh, the trees are climbing tall past the mountains to the sky. The river's running swift, quicker than the rabbit flies. And I am one, Mother Nature's cub. Papa's in the barn, sleeping with his Oh, the grass is growing dead like the color of the sun. The weeds are growing thick like the mosquitoes of the pond. And I am one of Mother Nature's cub. Papa's in the barn, sleeping with his and I am one of Mother Nature's son, and Papa's in the barn.
And it's not that people aren't voting on the issue. It's not that it's an important issue to even some politicians. It's the chips are totally stacked against us. The biotech industry has so much influence over politicians and lobbying and how the laws are structured. It's a massive joke. When you start looking at what's happened in Hawaii and Connecticut, how the bills are getting gutted, how they have a 2050 start date, how now they only apply to fresh fruit and only imported stuff, not local stuff. And now we have the King Amendment that will basically make any state labeling efforts unenforceable on a federal level. So we're just being run over by the biotech industry in the form of our own legislative process.
The fields to the south, the concrete building space with the cost that puts us out. And I am one of Mother Nature's cub, and Papa's in my
We had 52 countries participate with 436 cities and over 2 million people. And the fact that it remained peaceful. We had Veterans for Peace come out and talk about how Agent Orange has affected the veterans.
Well, I know here in Orange County, KCAL 9 News covered the hot dog hooker, but didn't cover the march.
Next year we want, 20 million instead of 2. And from the indigenous people's communities come out and talk about how this has impacted them and how they feel they've been targeted.
Monsanto science against activists, which is how they like to portray it, when really it's Monsanto science versus science.
Happening in America and not in 64 other countries around the world because we've been buying it. We have been buying this food. We are responsible for this as well. So what we need to do is not buy it, but in order to not buy it, we need to educate
It's so inspiring to see all these people that care, you know, 'cause it is truly the issue of our time.